It has occurred to me today, and in the past, but I was thinking about it today, that D&D style RPGs have a really hard time accounting for or factoring in or even allowing for extensive social contacts for the player characters or elevated social positions for the characters. Just as an example, in my Legend of the Five Rings campaign, or actually just in L5R campaigns in general, the characters are nobility. Like the position of a samurai is the position of a noble, a lord or a lady. The peasantry needs to, defer to them, to obey them, to, address them as my lord or what have you. And sometimes some characters are even part of like the imperial court, and they have the backing of powerful characters. Like they're not generally at the head of, like, I mean, I suppose you could play as a daimyo of some sort. It's not common, but even if you are not, you have the backing of a daimyo. There is some higher samurai behind you that it has sent you on a mission, and you are acting with their authority. And so, functionally, you are acting with the authority of that office to exact great change in the world or in whatever task it is that you're trying to accomplish. Another example is in the podcast that I keep talking about. I've mentioned it a few times by now. Go check it out. In Worlds Beyond Number, the D&D podcast from Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Erica Ishii, and Lou Wilson. Fantastic, like just perfect cast, pretty much. Is extremely entertaining. Go listen to it. It's one of the best best storytelling experiences I've had in the last year. In that story, you have characters that are of great station. One of them is an Archmage apprentice of a powerful citadel of wizards, and she acts with the authority of that citadel, and she has sort of the backing of that entire faction. Think a cabal of hundreds of wizards, thousands of wizards that are there. They're at the service of an imperium, but they're also there for their own interest. They are their own separate faction, and they will back her if she calls on them for an appropriate cause, of course. And another character is a powerful witch. Well, she's not a powerful witch. She's like level 2 or level 3 by the time the show starts. She is a new witch, newly appointed to a position, but she is part of a coven of witches that govern very powerful aspects of the world. So there's these like deep rooted connections to powerful factions and positions of authority. They have titles. They have, there is this expectation of greatness about them. It's a little incongruous with regards to the mechanics of the game, because they are low-level characters, and so they're not very powerful. An Archmage apprentice who's been studying for years and years was a level 1 wizard. Didn't even have second-level spells. The Witch of Toma, the Witch of the World's Heart, is also like a, first, second-level witch. Very low-level abilities. These kinds of things, which is, that's kind of an issue with D&D. And to be honest, no, I'm not going to get into that. I don't think that's a related issue. No, just in general, the idea that characters in D&D and related games have high station. They have, connections to powerful factions, potent and influential NPCs that will have their back. These are very difficult things to model in a typical D&D game. And in RPGs in general, I think, kind of going off of D&D's example, it was something kind of represented. So it was represented, I think, kind of well in the RPG Mouse Guard, where one of your character's stats, sort of a secondary stat, is it was called circles, and is representing your social circles. So if you want to know, like, do I know someone here? Or, maybe they've heard of me, or maybe I've heard of them, you would roll circles to see if you have that kind of connection. And that, I think, is a pretty serviceable mechanic for a world that you don't really want to establish like all of your social connections right at the get-go. Sort of, as we go, see if you have a connection to these people. That works okay. D&D 5th edition actually introduced for the first time in D&D that I know of the idea that your character has pre-existing bonds to the world. This is something that 4th edition didn't do. It kind of vaguely hinted at it in later publications, what with your background, which you could do. Most people didn't. But 5th edition introduced the idea of the bonds. You have your personality traits, bonds, flaws, and ideals. The issue there being that it was kind of very poorly implemented. You sort of like wrote a bond, and if you think of it, maybe you'll get advantage occasionally on a roll if it applies. If you play up your bond. That's extremely. It was like somebody had a decent idea that got fully shoved to the side, and then like right before publication, they were like, oh, actually, yeah, we put that in this little like thing that all kind of doesn't really matter. It's such an incredibly small, tiny mechanic that is largely insignificant and unused. In fact, I think it's gone away for the 2024 rules. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Maybe, am I making that up? Maybe. I want to say that those parts of the character sheet are gone in the 2024 version. I might be wrong on that. I'm not sure. Anyways, point being that they sort of like token effort at this, and it truly is a token effort. It does not really accomplish the goal of integrating a character into the world in a way that gives them power, authority, prestige, connections. It does not accomplish that goal. And we understand why. We understand why this is. That D&D characters are supposed to be self-sufficient. You're out there to solve problems, and if you know someone who's really powerful, you could just ask them to solve it for you, and why wouldn't you? You could come up with a reason not to, but the list of reasons is not big. And it can get kind of repetitive, like, no, I got to do it for myself for reasons. The thing is that it does kind of limit the number of stories that you can tell. Like D&D is a very specific kind of story. You can warp the game to try to tell other kinds of stories, at which point other systems probably would be better. But D&D as written is really meant for a sort of independence kind of fantasy where your group of player characters, the protagonists, are off doing things that are important or important to them, and you're kind of self-sufficient. You are, like, maybe you defer to local authorities, maybe you don't, but you are the ones sort of, like, making the call about what needs to be done. And you don't really answer to anyone, ultimately. That's pretty common in D&D. And sometimes there are exceptions, of course, but that's kind of how the game is written to assume. Other RPGs take a different approach, and I kind of think I like these other approaches a little bit better. These approaches where, like, you're not just like this independent sort of like this unique thing that doesn't happen other than yourselves. You are part of the world. You have lived there your whole life. You have made connections. You have ties to people and to factions and to societies. Like, you've been places, you know people, these kinds of things. And it makes the world a little bit richer for it. I mean, some games do it better than others. I would think Blades in the Dark or Forged in the Dark systems in general tend to do this pretty well, considering that, like, primarily with like flashback mechanics. The flashback mechanics is actually great for this, where as soon as you meet a new NPC, You can flash back to that time when you met this NPC, when you had drinks with them, when you paid them off before even getting here. You can do that, sort of retroactively decide that, like, I have connections to this person or this faction or what have you. So Forged in the Dark games do this pretty well. Let me think. I think Fabula Ultima actually also does this pretty well. In fact, I think Fabula Ultima might be one of the better examples. Because you have Fabula points that you can spend to, change the narrative, to decide, to like make decisions about the way that the world is or the way the world works. And incorporating your character into a faction is absolutely a great way to use Fabula points. So that can happen, but even more so, characters in Fabula, there's a sort of narrative freedom with regards to like what your character's background is that makes it more appealing and more expected to have characters that are integrated into factions. Like, you can play as like the monarch of a kingdom. You have a nation, you are in charge, and you're doing, adventures because no one else can, because you are the only one who can do whatever it is that you're trying to do. You've left someone else in charge. They will defer to you if you come back, that kind of thing. Like, this is a thing that can happen in Fabula because the system is designed to sort of accept that the world, isn't set in a specific way. Like, D&D kind of takes worlds that are set to a specific, like there's certain specific expectations in D&D that I think are not present in Fabula, such as that the characters are alone, and I think the whole Fabula point mechanic is just a great way, even if you don't want to like have previously established, like you don't want to set out at the beginning of the campaign to say, oh, I am a king or a queen. I'm the emperor of this nation. Even if you don't want to do that, like maybe you'll decide that later, like that's something you definitely want to talk to your GM about, of course. But yeah, there are games out there that facilitate this kind of thing, creating deeper connections to the characters via, and it's like it's a form of world building, isn't it? Yeah, I think D&D doesn't do it particularly well. No edition of D&D does it well, to be honest. Not one of them. Not even fourth. Not even the good edition. Yeah. So that's. I don't think I have any conclusions. I don't think I have any like fixes. I don't think there is a really good way to integrate this idea into D&D. I don't think it should be done. Even if it can, I don't think it really should be. I don't think it's necessary. But it was just an observation that I wanted to make about how different kinds of games can encourage different kinds of characters, and D&D does not do this particular kind of character really well, where you are of high status, high position in some faction of the world. You can do it in D&D. It's not particularly well supported, and you kind of have to do a lot of the legwork yourself.